Ken loved gunplay, like really loved Gunpla, those plastic model kits of giant robots from the Gundam universe. Yeah, those were his jam. It all started innocently enough. A single RX-7082 Gundam model caught his eye at a hobby store. He built it in a day, the plastic snapping together like magic. From then on, he was hooked. Years passed. Ken's collection exploded. Shelves groaned under the weight of Zakus, Doms and Gundams of every shape and size. His apartment transformed into a shrine dedicated to mecha mayhem. But life, as it always does, got complicated. Ken had a wife, Sarah, and a bright-eyed son, Leo. They deserved his time, his attention. Yet Ken found himself increasingly lost in his plastic universe, neglecting the real world around him. Ken's days blurred together. Work, eat, sleep, repeat, and of course, build Gunpla. He justified his late nights. Just one more piece, he'd mutter, tweezers in hand, as Sarah sighed from their bed. His obsession wasn't just about the building, it was about escaping. Each snap of a part, each careful swipe of paint, transported him to a world of giant robots and epic battles, a world where he was in control, where everything made sense. The real world, however, was messier. Dust gathered on his Gunpla empire. Bills piled up, ignored. Leo tugged at his shirt, asking to play, but Ken would brush him off, promising to spend time later. Later never seemed to come. The worst part, Ken barely noticed. He was too far gone, lost in his plastic galaxy, oblivious to the hurt he was causing. Ken. Sarah's voice, usually so gentle, was sharp with frustration. Dinner's been ready for an hour. Leo wants to show you his drawing. Ken flinched, startled. He'd been so engrossed in meticulously applying decals to his latest masterpiece, a towering Neo Zeong, that he'd lost track of time. Again. He looked at Sarah, her face etched with disappointment, and then at Leo, his small face crumpled with hurt. Guilt stabbed at him, sharp and sudden. Arguments became more frequent. Sarah felt ignored, replaced by plastic robots. Leo just wanted his dad back. The one who used to build pillow forts and read bedtime stories, not the one glued to his workbench. Ken, for his part, felt misunderstood. This wasn't just a hobby. It was his passion, his escape. Couldn't they see that? But even as he argued, a tiny voice whispered in his head, planting seeds of doubt. One day, Leo approached Ken, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. "Daddy, I drew a Gundam for you," he announced, his voice full of hope. Ken looked at the drawing. It was abstract, a jumble of crayons that vaguely resembled a robot. But in Leo's eyes, it was a masterpiece. He looked at Ken, his small face alight with anticipation, and that's when it hit Ken. The seed of doubt bloomed into full-blown realization. He was so busy building his own worlds, he was neglecting the one he already had. He was missing out on Leo's childhood, on the precious moments that would never come again. The guilt was crushing. He knelt down and hugged Leo tightly. "It's amazing, buddy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The best Gundam drawing ever." That night, after Leo was asleep, Ken sat alone in his workshop, surrounded by his plastic creations. But for the first time, they didn't bring him joy. They felt like burdens, obstacles between him and the people he loved most. Section 5, building bridges, one snap at a time. The road to change was long and arduous. Ken started small. He set aside specific times for gunplay building, carving out more space for family time. He started involving Leo in his hobby, showing him how to snap the pieces together, explaining the stories behind the giant robots. At first, Leo was more interested in using the Gundam's beam sabers as lightsabers, but slowly he became intrigued. He loved hearing about the heroic Amuro Ray and the mighty Gundam. He even started helping Ken paint, his tiny hand carefully wielding the brush. Sarah, initially skeptical, began to see the change in Ken. He was more present, more engaged. He made an effort to listen, to spend quality time with her and Leo. The spark that had dimmed in their relationship flickered back to life. One evening, as Ken and Leo were building a particularly challenging model, Sarah walked in. She watched them for a moment, a soft smile gracing her lips. "You know," she said, "I never understood this whole gunplay thing." Ken chuckled. "It's hard to explain, but," Sarah continued, "seeing you two like this, I get it now. It's not just about the robots, it's about the time you spend together, the stories you share. Ken looked at Leo, who was deeply engrossed in attaching a shield to a Gundam's arm. He realized Sarah was right. Gunpla had become a bridge, a way for him to connect with his son, to share his passion. The more time they spent building Gunpla together, the closer Ken and Leo became. They'd spend hours discussing their favorite mobile suits, debating the merits of beam rifles versus heat hawks. Ken even started taking Leo to Gunpla expos, where he marveled at the intricate dioramas and custom-painted models. But more importantly, Ken learned to listen to Leo. He discovered his son's love for drawing, his fascination with dinosaurs, his fear of the dark. He became the father he'd always wanted to be, present and engaged. Gunpla, once a source of conflict, had become a catalyst for their bond. Life wasn't perfect. There were still days when Ken found himself lost in his plastic world, the allure of just one more piece proving too strong. But now he was more aware. He made a conscious effort to balance his passion with his responsibilities. He learned that it's okay to have hobbies, to have passions that set his soul on fire. But he also learned that family, love and connection were the most important things in life. And sometimes, just sometimes, those two worlds collided in the most beautiful way. One lazy Sunday afternoon, Ken, Sarah and Leo were in the living room. Ken was building a Gunpla model, Leo was drawing, and Sarah was reading a book. The sun streamed through the window, bathing the room in a warm glow. Leo looked up from his drawing. "Daddy, can we watch that Gundam show later?" he asked. Ken smiled. "Of course, buddy." He glanced at Sarah, who smiled back, her eyes full of love and understanding. In that moment, surrounded by his family, his passion, and a whole lot of plastic, Ken felt a sense of contentment he hadn't felt in a long time. He had found his balance, and it was awesome.